Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is the time to start the fifth event of the AAEOY Speaker Series. I'm Larry Wan, the host for today. Allow me to first have some introduction of the background of the events to us. Today's event is our honor to have the speaker, Mr. Mir Imran. Later, our moderator, Christy Wan, would share a lot of the detailed background, what Mr. Imran can share with us. I've been volunteering at CIE since 2004, being president, chairman, and so forth, and also being the chairperson to lead the AAEOY in 2014. AAEOY stands for Asian American Engineer of the Year. It's an annual recognition event. The first event started in year 2002 on the U.S. National Engineers Week program. So far, we have over 300 awardees as they have been the role model and also the inspiration for the STEM community. The past awardees includes 9 Nobel Laureates and many academic scholars, key corporate executives, 3 cabinet members, and also 1 astronaut. The Speaker Series started in year 2020 as a result due to the delay of the event from the pandemic. We also had the executive forum of AAEOY awardees. The Speaker Series invites the past awardees as well as distinguished industrial and business leaders to share their knowledge and experience, as well as interact directly with the audience in this event. The last 4 speakers are outlined here. They're from AT&T, Boeing, the IBM, as well as unicorn entrepreneur from Ellie Mae. We also like to acknowledge our sponsors and partners and National ACE, that's National Asian and the Pacific Islander Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurship. They provide technical assistance to AAPI small business owners. So we appreciate their support and welcome audience from that organization. It is also my great honor to introduce today's moderator, Christy Wan. She has the JD from Northwestern University School of Law. She also studied business school at Kellogg Business School, completed Northwestern's Medical Innovation Program. She's a serial entrepreneur and investor in the medical field. Now she's leading the medical tech startup Vista Robotics on the orthopedic surgical robot. She's also a venture partner at Velair Venture. Before that, she had other startup experience, product being widely commercialized in the US. So let's welcome Christy and the speaker, Mir. Christy, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Larry. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, wonderful. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is Christy Wan, and thank you so much, Larry, for introducing me. And at the same time, also a board member and volunteer at CIE, which is my great honor too. So tonight, I think we're very delighted to have Mir Imran with us again. And I have been known Mir for quite a few years, huh? And then I remember one of our first conversations, we were actually talking about Theranos. Do you remember that conversation? So that actually brings a lot of memory. So today, because we have quite a lot of time today, so I would love Mir to actually share his experience with the founder of Theranos. And at the same time, of course, most of the times we're going to talk about Mir himself and all of his startups. And to me, Mir is not only an innovator, is not only a very successful or legendary entrepreneur, but he's also a very shrewd business executive, investor, and at the same time, a philosopher. So we are going to explore a lot about his mind today. And Mir is the fellow of both the National Academy of Inventors and the National Academy of Engineering. In his maybe close to 40 years of career, he founded more than 20 life science and medtech companies, and he himself is holding more than 800 patents. So out of all the companies, I think, Mir, you have exited close to 20 or maybe more than 20, I guess. And Ronnie Therapeutics, which is one of his companies, actually just went public last year. And this is his number 5 public company. So he's best known for his contributions to the first FDA-approved automatic implantable cardiovascular defibrillator. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Mir Imran. And Mir, today,
Thank you.
Most of our audience are, I think, in high-tech industries, right? Because, of our CIE nature. And I believe most of them are probably working for big companies or working for startup companies, but they might be thinking about entrepreneurship. So our first question to you is, how did you transition from a technical innovator to an entrepreneur? And that is a big transition, right?
It is a big transition usually, but I was always a tinkerer from childhood, and I used to build things and sell them. I would always sell whatever I built. So I had that from a very young age. And when I came to the US, I was only 17, right after high school, and went to Rutgers for engineering. So I'm also an engineer, just like many of the people in the audience. So my first startup was in a tech startup I did in 1978, I think, 78, 77 or 78. And while I was still in school, and so I had zero experience, I had no mentors, and just basically decided to start a company to create microprocessor controlled security systems. This was a time when there was a little company out in California called Intel that had a microcontroller that they were selling. So I got really into it and applied it to the creation of a security system. And that really was unfortunately a failure. And I didn't have enough experience and didn't have enough money and didn't have any mentors or other entrepreneurs around me. So a lot of entrepreneurs or engineers or scientists who are trying to become entrepreneurs and company founders, they have hundreds of entrepreneurs, experienced entrepreneurs who can help them and guide them. So, 43, 44 years ago, there was not much going on. And so that's how I got started. And then in grad school, I started another company, which was also a failure. And then after, towards the end of my medical school, I started a company to develop the first implantable defibrillator.
I see.
And, that was quite successful. It was acquired by Eli Lilly, which is a big pharmaceutical company. So that was how I got started.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds like, it's not that you, got started and then you became successful immediately, right? So just now you actually mentioned 2 failures while you were in school. And then starting from the third one, you probably accumulated a lot of experience. And just now you also mentioned very important thing, and you mentioned mentors. So it seems that if you want to transition from a technical innovator to entrepreneur, and you really need experienced people to teach
Yeah,
to.
I mean, you have to surround yourself with people with experience in a lot of different areas, including
Mhm.
uh, people who have started companies and exited them.
Mhm.
And you need lawyers and accountants to help you think through how you model a business, financial modeling, projections. So you have to answer a lot of business questions before you start a company. So you really need to, if you don't have those skills, you can get them, bring in a co-founder or bring in an advisor. So there are so many options for new entrepreneurs today.
I see. Well, just now I think you touched upon a lot of different areas. Number one, I think you are talking about you have to think over the business question before you even start it.
Absolutely.
Right. I think a lot of people, it's easy for them to jump into entrepreneurship without knowing what it is because they have some technology in their hand.
Right.
Yeah. What is your advice on this?
So technology is constantly changing,
Mm.
and you can't fall in love with technology or even a skill that you have, because remember, building a company requires many skills,
Mhm.
not a single technical skill.
Mhm.
So my advice is just focus on the problem you're trying to solve.
Mm.
Identify the problem, figure out if that problem is worth solving.
Mhm.
Is it a big problem that impacts a lot of people
Mhm.
and it costs a lot of money, or is it a tiny problem that most people won't care about?
Mhm.
And so you have to come up with criteria to select the right problem. And you have to talk to a lot of experts in that area to see if what you're thinking about is really needed, and really do your diligence before you spend money or especially other people's money.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
so doing that diligence and homework is so critical.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm sure that our audience will have, a lot of follow-up questions on, the things that we talked about and the things we're going to talk about. So for, our audience today, if you want to have, any questions answered by Mir, you can either just put your question in the Zoom chat so that, we can capture the questions later, or you can also, be prepared and raise your hand, throughout. And we also have a Q&A session at the end. Okay, depends on, how much time we use, so that, you can actually talk to Mir directly if you want to. Okay. So just now, Mir, you mentioned about, actually solving the first question, which is business related rather than technology related. But I kind of feel that most people probably didn't know how to do it. So what is your recommendation, especially for first-time entrepreneurs? What is the best way for them to figure out whether, that makes sense?
So, first of all, you should know yourself and how much risk you're willing to take,
Okay.
and how comfortable you are with dealing with a lot of different kinds of risks.
Mm.
And as I said earlier, start with the problem.
Mhm.
Make sure that the problem is worthy of solution. If
Mhm.
it's not, if it's a tiny little problem that only you can identify and no one else can relate to, then it's probably not worth solving.
Mhm.
So once you find a good problem to solve, that is really the solution of that would be very valuable.
Mhm. Mhm.
Then you have to sort of see if you have the skills to address that. And if you don't, you can, bring in other co-founders and who complement your skills. So this is really a team sport. This is not a solo exercise that you have to do everything. You can surround yourself with other people who can join you on your journey or be advisors. And and the key questions, business questions you're trying to answer is, first is this problem worth solving? If the answer to that is yes, and then you have to define and understand the problem. Just stating the problem may not be enough. You have to understand it in detail. And that requires a lot more diligence, a lot more research, and talking to people. How are people affected by that problem?
I see.
What is being done about that problem currently? Is there current technology that is addressing that problem? And if it is, is that solution not adequate, or if it is adequate? If there is an adequate solution, you may want to move on. But if there is no solution, or it's not an adequate solution, then you have you may have identified something that you should explore further. But then you have to ask, you have to come up with solutions, one or more solutions. And then the second question that's important to ask is the solution commercially viable? And so there are two questions: is the problem worth solving? And is the solution, does it have commercial value?
I see.
So these are the business questions. You can't just start the company without answering these questions. And then from these questions, there are a lot of other things that come. If it's, for instance, if it's a solution, is there intellectual property that you can protect? Is there competitive landscape? What does competition look like? And how much money it will take to develop the product, and so on. So there are lots of things once you identify a solution that you have to address.
So I think, in many of our conversations, you focused on problem and solution, right? Focus on these two things, the due diligence part a lot. Usually, out of the more than 20 companies that you founded, usually how long did you do that process? The first due diligence process.
So first, identifying the problem itself sometimes takes years, and understanding it, sometimes it takes a long time. And so my strategy has always been, I want to be thinking about a lot of different problems and exploring them in, without spending a lot of money, just researching them, trying to understand them. And I have developed criteria for picking the right problem. So, we in our daily lives, we see a lot of problems around us in various places. We don't jump and solve every single problem. So you have to have some criteria. So I have come up with a list of attributes of the problem that make it worthwhile to solve.
I see.
And I use that as a checklist to see if a problem that I'm considering checks out on that list or not. If there's some fundamental weakness in it, then you have to sort of think about it. So it's all really process driven. Even though there's a lot of creativity involved in it, unless you have a process that you wrap yourself around, it's really, you can easily make mistakes.
I see. Yeah, exactly. I think, even though you had many, many successful stories, like you mentioned earlier, that you still had failures, right? And remember, and it's great that you actually talked about your failure so that people know it's not easy to be a good entrepreneur. So, and sometimes, or most of the times, it's extremely difficult. So what is your fundamental motivation of that transition from a technical innovator to an entrepreneur?
I've always wanted to bring those innovations for the benefit of people, because I'm working mostly in in medicine, and if I have come up with some new therapy or new diagnostic, I really, I'm not satisfied just by sort of inventing it on paper and moving on. I want to make sure that I can bring it to market, bring it to the patient, and have the patients be helped. So, you know, I still work a lot of hours, and it's not just for the money. To me, the biggest pleasure is in identifying these big problems that impact a lot of people's lives. And if I can bring a solution to the market that helps those people, I think that to me is the biggest motivation.
I
And if
see.
you talk to any entrepreneur, they or many entrepreneurs, especially in life sciences, that's what drives a lot of life science entrepreneurs. But even non-life science stuff, you can improve people's quality of life so many different ways. I mean, we keep hearing about environmental issues and energy problems. So you can impact the lives of people in every single field. So I think that is the yardstick I measure my success is, am I improving the lives of people?
I see. I see. So that's the ultimate motivation behind,
Yeah.
you know, all the efforts here. And just now, you know, we mentioned that entrepreneurship is very hard. So what are the challenges during your transition to become an entrepreneur? And obviously you had at least two failures that you mentioned, right? When you were in
Yeah.
school. Yeah, but what are the biggest challenges?
Well, I think early on, because I was starting with zero experience and
Okay.
very little understanding. So just I my strength was not in business. I didn't have an MBA, and so I was focused on trying to understand finance and business and accounting and understanding markets and you know, and then later on I had to deal with manufacturing challenges and understanding manufacturing and quality, and then I had to deal with regulatory, FDA. So every one of these things was a hurdle that I had to understand, and you know, regulations that govern our industry are quite important to follow. Without that, you cannot get a product approved. So and I think the biggest lesson I learned is that, especially in talking to investors, is how you assess and analyze risk. You know, when you're starting off a new company, it has all kinds of risks. You know, competitive risk, the potential that your intellectual property would be worthless because somebody else has done it before, or execution risk, you know, regulatory risk in life sciences, manufacturing, marketing risk. So there are so many different kinds of risks, and as the company evolves and goes through different stages, you have to deal with different types of risks. But what I learned from investors, and especially when I became an investor, you know, 30 plus years ago, I started investing in other people's companies. That was the most important training I had, is that asking the business questions. And so I, you know, putting myself in the shoes of the investor, it became very obvious, and I became very sensitive to risk analysis and addressing, not just analyzing the risks, but coming up with a plan to address each type of risk, and be able to articulate that to investors, because you have to be transparent with your investors and be able to say, you know, this is how many different ways you can lose your money, but I have identified these risks and I'm prepared to address them so we don't lose any money.
I
And
see.
I have found that investors really appreciate entrepreneurs who, because, you know, as an entrepreneur, I always used to look at everything is opportunity, huge opportunity. This is going to change the world. You know, it has a $10 billion market potential and this and that. But entrepreneurs don't stop and think about risk and where things can go wrong. And when you become an investor, that is very important. And you're an investor. You think about it all the time.
Sure.
And I wish entrepreneurs also start to think and understand the investor's perspective, and they'll become better entrepreneurs if they did that.
Sure. Put yourself in the other people's shoes is probably the best way, right?
Yeah.
And I can see that, you know, some of our audience have already got questions here. And Mir, just now you mentioned about the criteria for picking a problem. I think one of our audience, he's actually asking, you know, what is the process that you follow, and what are your criteria and those things? Is it, you know,
Sure.
easy to talk about?
Sure. I mean, I can talk about specifically about the life science area, but also I've started 2 technology companies, so it applies to anything you're doing. So for each area you have, so for instance, if I'm building a company, let's say for treating some disease, or if I were building a company to do a body scanner for airports, and as I did back in 2003, you know, for each type of problem, you have to come up with what are the criteria. You know, in case of a life science problem, is how many people does it affect? What is the cost of that problem to the medical system? What is the impact of that problem on quality of life of the patient? And you talk to physicians, and you know, some of them will tell you it's not a problem worth solving. Others will say, boy, this is an absolutely important problem, and I wish there was a solution. And it might also be a criteria would be reduction of cost. You know, this is a big issue in healthcare. So will your solution dramatically reduce costs? I mean, you're working on a robotic surgery. I mean, a big part of robotic surgery, a big reason for it is improving outcomes, because you make the surgery more consistent, and reducing cost. Those are the 2 singular things, and improving, allowing the patient to recover much more rapidly. Recovery, you know, shorten the recovery time, shorten hospital stay. All of these things come from that. So if you look at a problem, you have to start asking questions. What are the important aspects of this problem? So it's not very mysterious and coming up with a list of criteria. Now, there are other criteria in life sciences, such as how large of a clinical trial will it require? How much will that trial cost? What is the FDA? How do you deal with the FDA with on a particular product? In technology space, you have to deal with a lot of other competing technologies. How do you access the market? You know, especially if it's a consumer product, it's, you know, accessing your customer becomes a big challenge and very expensive. So you have to see if you're going to find a distribution partner, or you're going to partner with a large company. You have to come up with a strategy on how you deal with big issues such as access to the market. And you may not have clinical trials to run in a tech product, but you still need to understand how to promote and market your product, how to manufacture it cost effectively. So your criteria becomes really easy once you start thinking about that particular problem and what should be the criteria. to see if that problem. I mean, for instance, I spent a couple of years looking at a healthcare problem called tinnitus, which is ringing in the ears. And I, worked with a otolaryngologist, on a neuromodulation, neurostimulation therapy that would treat this condition. And worked on it, and he had identified some patients, and he had human data that demonstrated that the approach would work to treat this condition. Then I started doing research on reimbursement. So if we came up with a solution, would the insurance companies reimburse, make them reimburse the cost of the product and the cost of the surgery? It was an implanted device. And I hired a really nationally recognized expert who had deep expertise in reimbursement. And he did an analysis of the market and came back and said, most insurance companies won't cover it because people who currently use this, they may use headphones which have, produce a certain kind of audio stimulation to cancel out your ringing. And so there's such low cost solutions. No one is going to reimburse $10,000 or $20,000 for the same thing. So I had to just, after 2 years of work, I was excited. I knew how to develop that product, and I had to just walk away from it because there was no reimbursement.
Okay.
And you can't build a business when there, especially life science business, where there is no insurance coverage, health insurance coverage. So that's an example of why diligence before you start a company and spend a lot of money is so critical.
I see. Wow. So it took you 2 years to realize that it's not a solution that you are going to pursue.
Yeah, I mean, I assumed in the beginning that, yeah, there's no reimbursement, but we may be able to get it. But then it took me, before I took the jump into it, I said, I need an expert to really analyze this and tell me.
Okay.
The answer was no. And I'm so glad I did that, because if I hadn't done that, I would have been able to raise the money because there were investors willing to put money in.
Sure.
But a few years down the road, I would have come face to face with this reality that no one would reimburse, and the business would have been shut down.
I see.
So you save yourself a lot of headaches, because why go through years of effort just to find out there was some fundamental flaw in your in picking that problem.
I see. Wow. Seems to me that it's a very logical process.
It is actually a very simple process. You have to question yourself whether, don't fall in love with something. I'm always looking, when I start to think about a new business, I'm always looking for all the reasons why I should not do it, not all the reasons why I should do it. So I want to really be super critical, hypercritical of my own ideas, because it's very likely that I have some blind spots and I'm not seeing everything.
I see. Okay. Well, I think this advice is very illuminating to any single one of us, I believe. And I have another question from one of our audience. I believe that he should be a researcher or a professor from academia. So his question is, what is your suggestion on building a solution in business from academic research?
A lot of companies come out of academic research, but a lot of things that are developed in academia don't become commercial successes. So the percentage of good ideas is very small, because for an academic researcher, you know, they're conducting research, a lot of them, not just to start companies, but to be able to you know, uncover some discover something, some new thing, or create a new technology for doing something. And you know, and one of the reasons the success rate is low is that a lot of researchers are working on very narrow areas of research.
Ah,
And that may be important, but that you can't start with a technology, your research, and then say I'm, you know, where I'm going to use it, and look for a problem to solve.
Mhm.
It's to me, that's a backwards, upside down thing. But I have a lot of friends, and I have helped a lot of my academic friends identify uh, the which of their projects is worthy of commercialization, help them think through that. So my suggestion to the academic researcher would be, find a non-academic entrepreneur
mm,
who understands your research, and have them help you think through the diligence
mm,
of whether it is worthy, you know, if they should just let the university out-license it to somebody and not jump into building a company, or whether it is a big enough idea that you should um, uh,
mm,
co-found a company, or help start a company.
mm.
But bring in that expert, you know, because academic researchers have a lot of depth of knowledge about their scientific area or engineering area, but they may not have the same level of depth in business and finance and marketing and regulatory affairs. So always bring in an expert to help you figure out. And I do that with a lot of my friends in various universities, to look at their research and give them feedback on whether something they should pursue, or point out where the challenges are likely to be.
I see. Well, thank you. Yeah, this is very helpful, I believe. Um, okay, another question is um, people are very curious because, you know, we mentioned out of the 40 years, you founded more than 20 companies.
For
So
43 years.
43 years. Okay. So if you count that, and each company only lasts for more than a year, like less than like 2 years, right?
It's about 8 to 10 years, you know.
10 years. So you must have concurrent ventures, like multiple
Oh
companies
yeah,
at the same
yeah,
time, right? So
yeah.
how did you manage them?
So with difficulty, but it is, you know, so I was identifying so many problems that really were important, and creating solutions that were really important. And you know, life is short, and I did the math, and I said, okay, if I'm gonna take 7 to 10 years for each, I might be able to solve maybe 5 or 6 problems
Mhm,
in my entire life,
mhm,
um, and maybe less than that. And I was so interested in solving these problems, so I started doing, not a I wasn't a serial entrepreneur, I was a parallel entrepreneur.
mm,
So I convinced a number of venture capitalists to allow me to fund my companies, and if I come up with some new company ideas, I should be able to file my patents and keep them separate from the company they invested in.
mm.
And most of the venture capital investors said no. If we invest in your company, everything that comes out of your head belongs to that company. And I'm talking about late 80s, I was doing this.
I see.
And must have talked to about 30 different venture capitalists.
Mhm.
One of them was from a very large venture fund. Said, Mir, I'll agree with you. I'll let you do that, provided you let me invest in every company you start. So that was music to my ears. And that started a long collaboration partnership and he invested in so many of my companies. But once that I started that process, other investors started accepting that I was somewhat unique in that I had a lot of ideas, non-overlapping. So I wasn't using the technology of one company to solve a problem in another company. Because I didn't really care about technology. I was really driven by problem.
I see.
So the solution to each different problem was optimized for that problem. And it so happened that every one of those technologies were completely unique and different.
Mm.
Because of that, and once I established a somewhat of a track record, people were willing to support it, investors. So I really appreciated that trust in what I was doing and supported that. It's not easy. It was really hard. I was working, as I still do, 7 days a week, but with very little sleep. And not only supporting the company that I had just started, but in nights and weekends, I'm working on the next 3 ideas for companies, and almost every year or every other year launching a new company. It was, it was hard. I don't recommend it, especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur, or first couple of times, do it, just focus on one thing, do it well. Make people some money, and they will become your supporters. And don't try and start 5 companies at once. Nobody is going to finance that.
Okay.
And even when I started this subsequent company, I always helped hire a CEO, the management team, and help the company stand on its own 2 feet. So that was really crucial. It's a if I had to do it all over again, I probably wouldn't have started this many companies. It just takes a toll on you.
Well, just now you mentioned that you still work like 7 days a week, and obviously it's not for money, right?
No, I don't care about money. Really,
yeah, I don't think you do. I don't think you do. But how do you, I mean, if you work 7 days a week and you do not really have any other time to do other things, how do you manage that stress? You don't recommend it to other people, but you're doing it yourself.
Well, I have to balance that with my family life,
Yeah.
my wife, and I have 5 children, and I have to spend time with them. And I work, I sleep 5 hours a day and
Wow.
work probably 12, 14 hours a day, and then the rest of the time with my family. And I really don't have any stress. I don't just because I don't I try to do my best, and I don't lose sleep over whether it's going to succeed or fail. And uh, and if something fails, it's not the end of the world. How you manage that failure, how you can communicate with your partners, your investors, your employees, how you take care of your employees in a difficult situation when the company is not doing well or not able to raise money,
Mhm.
or sometimes the macro conditions change.
Okay.
The market crash happens, and your ability to raise money
Mhm.
becomes really hard, and so you may have to, in 1999, I
Mm.
started a .com company
Mm.
to aggregate suppliers for life science companies.
Ah.
It's a B2B company, and it was an okay idea. And I did it for all the wrong reasons, because all my friends were starting .com, so I said that maybe I should start one. Wrong reason, but the concept was fine. Later companies did the same thing, became quite successful many years later. But so I raised a little bit of money. I put some of my own money in, and 9 months later, in the early part of 2000, there was a huge .com bubble that ruptured, and there was a giant market crash. And it was such a deep crash that I knew that it wasn't going to recover quickly. So I called all the investors, and I said, I have still have most of the money here. I haven't spent much,
Oh.
and I'm going to return the funds and shut down the company. And I talked to all the employees that I had hired. I helped, place them in other companies, and did an orderly transition. So sometimes it's macro conditions, and you have to recognize that and
Mm.
face those issues. So
Okay.
it's not
Well,
always smooth sailing. Even after getting funding, I had money. I could have limped along for another couple of years and run out of money and then shut down the company. But
I
that
see.
would not have been very responsible thing to
Possible.
do, especially you're managing funds from your investors. So
Mhm.
sometimes it's those things that are out of your control that cause failures, and that's okay. But it's how you manage that with your employees, with your investors is important.
Mm. So just now you mentioned about macro, conditions, and what do you think of the situation, economic situation today?
Well, it is a pretty dicey situation. Um, if you look at the stock market, it's
Yeah.
couple of days ago, Dow fell 1,200 points in one day,
Yeah.
and the market has been terrible for biotech companies. Also, a lot of them have gone out of business or not doing well, and so uh, I'm very cautious about starting. I've got several companies that I have in my incubator that I'm funding myself,
Okay.
and I didn't want to jump, and even though I had several investors willing to invest, and I looked at the market situation over the whole year.
Mhm.
Uh, it has been going down, and I decided to slow down the launch of new companies. I might still start a company next year, but I'll slow down the pace,
I see.
and make sure that I do I take the fiduciary duty of investor money so seriously that if there's anything that keeps me up at night, it's not whether the company is going to succeed or fail, or if there are big problems to solve. It's always I'm the guardian of these the funds somebody has given me, and I should do the very best for them. So
Mm.
I think all entrepreneurs, that's one advice to them, is really treat your investors money even with more care than you would your own money.
I see. Okay. Good advice. And just now you mentioned about team, right? You mentioned, at the same time, you really cannot start all the companies and do all of them yourself. So you have to help build up teams. you know, to find the correct CEO and also the colleagues and the team. So how do you value a colleague from the executive's perspective? How does a colleague stand out within a team, especially when the team is small?
I usually build a team on a technical team first, and I usually have a rent a CFO, part-time CFO, because I don't want to spend that much money because there isn't a very complex financial structure. So the primary focus is on product development and making sure you identify, you have a plan in place, the milestones and whatnot. And so you identify the kinds of people you will need to accomplish those milestones and only hire those people. So the goal is not, when you first start a company, is not to fill out the org chart. That is usually a mistake, so you don't have to hire a head of marketing, head of this, head of that. Hire the right people, whether it's a engineering manager or head of R&D or different kinds of engineers, software engineers, if it's a software company, and so hire the technical staff, build a team around the product, and then maybe after your second round of funding, start looking at hiring a CFO and bringing on a CEO. You remember, you won't be able to hire these high-powered people in these positions in a raw startup. You need to make progress. You have to take some of the technical risk and technology risk and product risk off the table before you're able to attract somebody who's going to leave a position at a successful company and come and work for your little startup, which has got lots of risk. So de-risk it so you can attract the next batch of really high performers, leaders who are going to help build out the company. So it's a process where you raise some money, you make progress, you meet some milestones. That helps you raise more money, and then when you raise that additional money, then you start building out your executive team.
I see.
And you do that appropriately, and you have to work closely with your board of directors to come up with this kind of a business plan where the board is in. You have to have these discussions up front, and this is what we're going to do. This is when we will look for this kind of a person, and there'll be back and forth and give and take, and you arrive at the right, because hopefully you have put really experienced people on your board who can help you think through these kinds of questions. So the board is not there just to rubber stamp, but they bring their own experience to the table.
I see. Okay. Well, we're talking about the teams, and at the very beginning, we're talking about being an investor, and we are trying to put ourselves in the shoes of an investor. So, from the investor's perspective, how did you look at Theranos? And remember this conversation that we had quite some time ago, and you mentioned that actually Elizabeth Holmes went to see you, right?
Yeah.
So, and she was asking for help. So how did that go? And what did you think at that point?
I mean, so she had a really sort of not a half-baked business plan. She was very passionate, and but she had no background. She had she hadn't even finished her second year of college, and she dropped out. And I said, my advice to you is go back and finish that degree. People give their right arm to be at an institution like Stanford. Go get your degree, and then come back and talk to me, and I'll help you think through this. But this is what you're doing is not likely to succeed. Please don't do it.
Okay, I see. And she didn't listen to you.
Obviously, she
Obviously.
didn't.
She
So,
didn't. Yeah. Did
so
you?
it was, and then a few years later, she came back to me and said, "Hey, can you help me make an introduction to some pharma companies? Because I now have a prototype, and I'd like to get some pharma companies to adopt my, rapid, one drop of blood to give you 200 different test results." And so I knew the head of pharmacology at GlaxoSmithKline,
Oh.
and I said, "I'll make the introduction." I called him up and I said, "Look, this young lady is very passionate. I don't think she has a lot of good technical background, but she claims she has made a prototype. I would just be very careful about jumping into it. But if you can help her and at least review what she's doing, provide feedback, that'll be great." So I made the introduction. She went there, and with a team of 4 or 5 people, and dragging big boxes of computers and this and that to set up her system. And this friend of mine had said, told her that he would have blood samples from a number of animal studies. So they had already tested on their standard equipment, standard analyzers, blood analyzers. And he said, "I'll give you the same samples. And if I get the same result, if you can show that you can get the same result, I'll give you a lot of business." So so they fiddled around apparently with their equipment, and he had 10 samples, and they said, analyze these things. And they finally, after 3 or 4 hours, they said, "Well, the equipment broke down during transit, so it didn't work, so we'll come back." So he said, "Okay, you can come back. I'll give you one more chance." So 2 years or a year and a half or 2 years after that, they came knocking on his door again and he said, "This same, I have the same condition. I'll have 10 blood samples from my animal studies that I have. I already know what's in it, what the analysis showed, and I want you to conduct the same analysis on your machine." And of course, she came back with her scientists and some big black boxes of equipment that supposedly was going to do it, and it obviously didn't work. So she was hoping that she could sweet talk them into giving her an order for their imaginary instruments. So it didn't work. So I feel sorry for her, but but not really, because it's one thing to make a mistake and start a company. It's another to deceive your investors, deceive the patients. Most importantly, she put so many patients at risk with her really. So there is no place for deceitful behavior, and where you can't build it's a house of cards. It will come crashing down at some point. So that's my Elizabeth Holmes story.
Yeah. So I think throughout our conversation, it seems that you put the integrity of a startup at very high level.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be, because we're not in this business, hopefully, to just do one thing. And how do you get the investors to come back and support you again? They won't. And if you get blackballed like she did, who's going to invest in her companies?
Exactly.
And in fact, I even had some friends who called me up and who were so impressed with her because she charmed them with her with her smile and whatever. And these were non-technical investors. And they said,
Oh,
"Hey,
no.
Mir, what do you think? Should we invest in this?" I said, "Absolutely not. I would not recommend it. Don't
Oh,
invest."
uh-huh.
And so one guy, after I gave him, I talked to him for an hour, and he, I read in the newspaper that after 2 weeks after he talked to me, he put in $100 million into her company.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
And of course, 2 years later, it all came out that it was all a farce.
Oh.
So
Mm.
it's so much easier. You don't have to remember all the lies if you always tell the truth. And even if you fail, your investors will still be might still support you in a future deal.
Mhm,
It's
mhm,
how you treat people.
mhm, mhm. Okay. Okay.
So
Well, thank
it's a sad story,
Mm.
and it's a good reminder that bad behavior does not pay.
Mhm. Thank you, Mir, for this. And we have more questions from the
Okay,
audience. I
all
think
right.
they're very attentive.
Yeah, I want some really hard questions,
Okay, so let's see one.
or really easy ones.
Easy. There is a Mr. John Lee, who is an MD and a PhD, and he said, "Thank you for your inspirational sharing and having." He has attended the biodesign classes at Stanford in
Wonderful.
2011, and nowadays it seems that the reimbursement early partnership with MNC strategic partner is the most critical gate for early stage medtech ventures. Any creative ways to setting up early alliance with MNC strategics?
Yeah, strategic multinationals are you you can't set those a very valuable relationship too early.
Mm.
So they, like most other business partners, are going to require some demonstration that what you have is clinically viable and you have some clinical data.
Mhm.
And if you have that, then you might get one or more people interested. So in my case, I always wanted to bring in large companies to invest, and I was quite successful at bringing them in. And most of the time, I brought more than one company to invest, but I never gave them any rights. Don't ever give them, they make a $5 million investment and they have distribution rights for Europe or distribution rights for the whole world, and whatever.
Mm.
I have never given them rights, and you can just say that this is too early to give you any rights. If you find this compelling, you should make an investment. For them, putting in a few $1 million is not a big thing. If it is truly a valuable idea, and get that, but don't turn that into it's not an acquisition. A few $1 million investment is a few $1 million investment, and it does not merit giving up rights to anything.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, and one way to deal with that, I have brought in two competing companies and sometimes three competing companies that are competitors with each other as investors in my one company. So I've done that many times where two competing companies made investments, and I told each one that I'm not going to give you any rights, but I'd love to have you because this is something that is going to be strategically valuable for you. And so I've never had any issues with that. And partnerships are important, and it's a validation also for your investors, for others, to have a corporate partner and make an investment. But Don't, and by the way, if you give up any rights, it diminishes the value of your company. Just think about it. It doesn't enhance the value. If you take their money without giving them rights, that enhances the value. If you take their money and give up a big, a lot of, give them a lot of rights, that diminishes the value, because who's going to buy it now? Right? And they have got some really good assets, and so they might pay you a small amount for the rest of it. So strategically, it's a horrible idea to give early rights to blood companies.
And remember, we had this conversation too, and you mentioned that I can give them the first right of negotiation, but not the first right of refusal for the future M&A. Or something.
I mean, my preference is not to give them anything, but if I have to, I might say that you'll have a first right of negotiation, and it will expire by such and such date. 2 years from now.
Very limited.
Or even a first right of refusal, but that has a shelf life, an expiration date.
I see.
So nothing is forever.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, now you are so successful, so you wouldn't have any problems, attracting those giant or strategics. But for, let's say, the first time entrepreneurs, like what is the best way for them to get connected with the corporate and
So I think a lot of corporates have become used to investing without requiring any rights. And most of these multinationals have their own venture funds, and they make investments just like VCs do, without requiring any. And so it's actually quite common now to be able to do that. Now, if you don't ever approach them, you can approach them for investment, but don't say, this is strategically important, you should invest because, I'll give you rights to X, Y, and Z. Don't ever offer it. Okay. And if they ask, flatly refuse. Politely.
Yeah. And then you mentioned that, we need to have at least the clinical data to attract them, right?
I think the further along you are, the more excited and serious they will be. Yeah.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. If you have FDA clearance, then that would be even better.
Oh, yeah. I mean, then your options are, then they may come in and just acquire you, right? If you have that.
Yeah, very true.
So they won't. But, I have had smaller corporate partners, let's say in Japan. I've had many times, for several of my companies, where a distribution company in Japan would make a $5 million investment in return for distribution rights for Japan only. And then you negotiate those distribution rights with certain performance criteria. I see. That you're going to sell X amount of product in a year, and if they don't, then if they don't meet their projections, sales projections for X number of time, then they lose the distribution right. So everything has to be negotiated so that you're protecting the interests of your shareholders.
Understood. Thank you. Another question that we have is, could your entrepreneur ideas get stolen when discussing with others, assuming there is no patent yet? How did you prevent that? Because just now you mentioned, the due diligence part, you have to talk with a lot of people.
So you don't have to talk to anybody unless you have filed. You should not. You have filed patents. And patent law in the US and Europe is such that if you have filed a patent, even if it's provisional in the first year or so, you have protection, especially if you disclose it under a confidentiality agreement. You could have a patent filing doesn't cost a lot of money.
Mhm.
And most entrepreneurs can afford that. And a lot of patent lawyers, they want your business. So they'll say, okay, I'll file the patent. You don't have to pay me now. You can pay me when the company is funded.
Mhm. Mm. I see.
So yeah, do always file patents before you disclose your inventions, and even when you file the patent, disclose them under confidentiality agreement.
The NDA. And you mentioned about the patents filing. Would you recommend provisional or non-provisional at the beginning?
You can file provisional at the beginning, and within a year you have to convert it to
Convert to non-provisional.
utility patents anyway.
Okay.
And you don't lose anything by doing that.
Sure. Okay. And a lady from our audience, she appreciated your insights and experiences. There is a general sentiment that women entrepreneurs face different risks than their male counterparts. Do you agree? If you agree, how can women entrepreneurs approach this entrepreneurial process differently to learn and succeed?
So, this was true when I first started, with very few women entrepreneurs, but increasingly more and more, you see it's probably not the same as number as men, but it's not that insignificant.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of women in venture capital also. So that helps those women entrepreneurs. And I think you should just, if you have some great problem to solve and you have a great business plan, go for it. Don't be afraid. I think it's women entrepreneurs are very successful. They work harder than men, I think, in my experience, or just as hard. And they're super smart. I don't see any downside and only upside in supporting women entrepreneurs. So go for it.
Thank you, Mir.
And the world has changed. In the 80s and 90s, things were very different. But now I think happily things are much better.
Thank you. And then, being a woman entrepreneur myself, I have some comments too for Miss Lisa Sun. I think my advice would be, I think if you are the only founder, that would be actually pretty difficult. So the first thing that I would think of is probably to find the right partners to partner with, the co-founders. I think that would be much easier.
Right. And the co-founders don't have to be men.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
totally.
I mean,
Just yeah, exactly.
I mean, men are overrated, they just have big egos, and women actually make better decisions, and are just as smart or smarter.
Thank you, Mir. We appreciate that. Okay, so I think we have approximately another 10 minutes. If there is anyone who wants to, raise hand and talk to Mir directly, now is the time that you could, just to raise your hand. And I think our volunteers can take a look at and see whether anyone has questions.
Ting Yi has raised his hand. Ting Yi.
Okay,
Yep.
Okay, I think we can hear you.
Okay, Christy. Hi, Mir. Thank you
Hi.
for hosting the session, and thank you for your time. Really, a lot of valuable advice. And my name is Ting. I started my career in product development. I have launched some products at diagnostic companies, and I am now a sales manager. So doing more in the commercial side of things. I've been building up my skills, and I have always been interested in entrepreneurship. And one of the things I really appreciate that you mentioned a lot in the beginning of the session here is to start with a problem.
Mhm.
And I can tell that you are a person who is very good at identifying good problems. And I do think that's a key skill for anyone who wanted to start that. So I kind of want to go back to that, the starting point here. And that's a question I have for myself is, how do you, what are the sources that you use to identify a good problem, right? Do you kind of encounter the problems by chance, or is there a systematic way that you do to seek and screen problems? I think I have enough kind of my own knowledge and method in terms of vetting problems. My problem is about the starting point, right? Do you get these problems by talking to people? Do you by listening to news, by observing things at work? Where do these problems come from?
Okay, that's a great question. At one time, I've been asked this question many, many times. So one day I sat down and made a list of, for each company, I wrote down how I came up with that, how I identified that problem. And it actually, everything that you mentioned, sometimes it's reading a newspaper or reading an article where something is mentioned that catches your eye. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. Or you have a personal experience in your life with a loved one or a friend who has a healthcare problem and they're not getting adequate adequate therapy, or the diagnostics are not as accurate. Whatever it is, you can, if you can relate to that problem, that's another way you can find a problem. Sometimes you encounter technology, somebody you see or read about a technology and you say, boy, I hope, I have this problem in the back of my mind. I've thought about it, never knew how to do it, but this technology might actually work for that. So there are so many different ways you identify it. Sometimes I have identified problems by careful observation, careful research myself. I'll give you an example, for instance, a couple of examples. In one case, Rani Therapeutics, Christy mentioned at the beginning of the conversation. This is a company that has developed a platform for converting injectable drugs like insulin into an oral pill, and with while achieving similar absorption as a painful injection. So how did I figure that out? Decide to work on that. I was having lunch with a senior executive from a large pharma company, and I asked him what he was doing. He had come to visit me in Bay Area, and I said, "What brings you here?" He said, "I'm on the board of this biotech company, and they just closed their doors. They went out of business. And I'm always really interested in failures, when companies fail, when something fails, because that's where the opportunities are." So I said, "Well, tell me why it failed." He said, "Well, they were trying to convert this injectable drug called parathyroid hormone for the treatment of osteoporosis, and to convert it to oral. And after years of effort and whatnot, they were not getting bioavailability more than a fraction of a percent. Absorption, most 99.9% of the drug was getting destroyed by the enzymes in the gut. It just chews it up. And so I was really intrigued. I had never thought about converting these injectable drugs to oral. I mean, the problem was all around us. But when he said that that company had failed because they couldn't figure it out, then I realized that what they were what all these companies over the last 50 years, my research showed that over the last 50 years, there have been about 150 separate attempts at converting a handful of peptides into oral. And all of them had failed by then.
Wow.
So I decided, I said, you know, with my engineering background and my medical background, I came up with a hypothesis. I knew that intestines don't have the pain sensors. Intestinal wall doesn't have the pain sensors like your skin does. So my hypothesis was very simple. What if I came up with a pill that you swallow just like any other pill, a capsule or a pill, and it goes into the intestine. And once it's there, it knows it's in the intestine and it transforms itself into an injection. And it's like a tiny robot you swallowed. And there it delivers a pain-free injection of that drug, whatever drug it is, into the intestinal wall. Now, the intestinal wall is highly vascularized, a lot of blood supply there, and no pain. So that was the hypothesis. That's how I identified that problem. Because I mean, I knew people injected biologics, but I had never focused on that problem. So that's one example of how I found it. And now it's reality. We're getting excellent results. We can deliver any biologic drug orally with bioavailability similar to or better than a sub-Q injection or a IV injection or an intramuscular injection. So it's absolutely an amazing technology. Let's see. So I have, you know, every company that I've started has had some, you know, in one case, I had started a company for the treatment of hemorrhagic stroke. And I thought of that reading an article. So hemorrhagic stroke are treated, you know, if they find an aneurysm in the brain, the current standard of care at the time was you go in through the blood vessel with a catheter and place these tiny springs, coils, and they're made out of platinum or some other metal, and stuff them into the aneurysm. And basically the idea is you stuff enough of those, the blood will coagulate and form a clot, and that over time will seal that aneurysm and the blood, you know, and that actually works. But you know, after 6 months after implantation of those coils, you have to bring the patient in for an angiogram to see if that aneurysm is still closed. And they find in about 35–40% of the time they have to stuff more coils because it has grown some more. So when I read that article, it was talking about that you know, their complication rates were less than 5%, but reoperating or redoing or adding more coils rate was around 35%. So they were, to me, whenever you have to redo something, that's a complication. So that was a flag immediately I saw. I said, boy, this has to be solved. And I came up with the solution and launched a company. And while we were actually in clinical trials, a large company came and bought it even before we had finished the trial because the results were so good.
Okay.
So that's an example of just reading an article and with a very critical perspective and identifying that nugget where they were saying, oh, this is just a re-op and not a complication. And complication were only 5%. But in my book, whenever you have to redo something, that's a complication. So I'm sure, you know, in your audience, physicians will appreciate what I was just talking about.
Thank you. Thank you, Mir. I think let me do a last call. Do we have anyone else who want to, speak with Mir in 1 minute?
And any of you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. And we can have further conversation if you have questions.
Thank you, Mir. Or maybe, Mir, our last question to you is to give some career advice to our high-tech workers. Besides the technical ladder, what are some of the other paths one can consider? And do you recommend everyone to become an entrepreneur? So what is your advice?
It's like, and this is not for everyone, just like, everyone can't be a neurosurgeon or everyone doesn't want to be a pilot. So if it is a passion of yours to solve problems and bring those solutions to market, to the patient, or to the market for users, but even if it's an app that you've come up with that solves a fundamental problem, or a virtual reality application or an AI application that really transforms something, transformative solution, go for it. I mean, those are needed. And the only way you can bring those to people is by commercializing it. So that is do it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mir. Really appreciate your insights and
my pleasure. My pleasure.
Inputs. And also, thank you, Larry and Jonathan and all of our CIE volunteers who put this event together tonight.
Thank you, Larry and Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Christy, it's such an honor to be here and to be talking to you and to all the folks in the audience. Thank you for inviting me to do this.
Thank you. It's always my pleasure. Yes, we will continue the conversation.
Such an honor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mira. Thank you, Christy.
Yeah, and thank your audience for joining us.
For the last moment, can we have CIE's volunteers turn on their video? And we have a group picture with Christy and Mir.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay. How does that work?
That will work fine.
Yeah, make mine small. Oh, where am I? Oh, they.
All right. Please turn on your video. All right. Thank you very much to everyone. And our event today would conclude. Next speaker series, we now target right before the holiday season. So we'll send out the information. And again, thank you so much to our wonderful speaker today.
My
Mir
pleasure.
Imran.
Thank you.
And also appreciate Christy again, one of the best moderator in Bay Area. Thank you too.
Thank you, Christy. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Mir.
All right.
Okay, great.
Thank you and good night. Everyone
Good
have a
night.
wonderful weekend.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
have a good night.